Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking, and thank you for allowing me to go ahead and speak to your community. I grew up right here. I was born in Los Angeles at the Queen of Angels Hospital, and I grew up in West Covina, California. So I've spent my entire life here in the LA area. I went to Covina High School, then I went to Cal State LA and a few more colleges around here because, like all of us, as you're going through college, you're still trying to work. And so I had to drop some classes here and there, but the bottom line is I eventually graduated from Azusa Pacific many years later. But I've always been here in the Los Angeles area, and this is my community here in Los Angeles.
Absolutely. So you're a homegrown person.
Absolutely. I've lived here my whole life, and then I've gone through the sheriff's department and worked here my whole life. Worked in the sheriff's department for 32 years.
That is awesome. That is awesome, Mr. Lindsey. Okay, cool. Now, next question here. When did you find an interest in law enforcement?
You know what? I never grew up wanting to be a policeman, but later on in life, when I started dating my current wife, I've been married for 39 years. Her dad was a detective in West Covina, so he really is the one that got me interested in being a police officer. And ultimately, after applying to a few agencies, and nobody ever give up out there, by the way, because I applied at a few agencies and they didn't accept me, for whatever reason. Back then, this was back in the 70s. Remember, my hair was like out to here, and it was those days. But the bottom line was I never gave up, and ultimately I got the job with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department in 1978. And then after I got that job, my wife said, "Now that you have a job, we can go ahead and get married," because she wanted the benefits. I think I'm not sure she wanted me; she wanted the benefits.
That's awesome. Now let me ask you a question here, Mr. Lindsey. What do you see in the time that you started law enforcement, and then now in how the sheriff department deals with the community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a complete breakdown right now, and it's the sheriff's department is lacking training. It's lacking the ability to communicate effectively with the community. And I'll tell you right now, I mean, as much as we want law enforcement out there and we want response, we're 1,500 deputies down on our department right now. And so when you call for somebody to come out there, they're late getting there, first of all, or sometimes they don't even show up. But the bottom line is when you're that short, that means that there's no time for deputies to get trained. They're going from call to call to call. But here's the other problem. That means that they're not able to get out into the community and actually develop relationships. And I'll tell you what, I think the development of relationships with the community is very important. When you don't take the time to get out and actually listen to the community and what the problems are, then we're going to fail. Even inside the department, we can talk the difference. I mean, here I am, I'm, early 60s, and I'm running. I have kids who are millennials, but, when you're a parent raising somebody, I can tell you that there's cops on the sheriff's department who are in their 40s and 50s, and they don't understand their partners who come from a different generation. And I think there's a generational gap that we need to fill. So there's a generational gap, communication problem, and then there's also a demographic problem. We haven't hired enough from the communities where they're actually policing. We need people hired from those communities, and that has been a failure for the last 5 years minimum. I can tell you back in the early 2000s, I hired about 65% Hispanic and some Black, but we tried to make the demographics match the community. Since about 2006, it's been a complete dismal failure. It's never happened after that. So we got to get back to that so that the people policing the community actually understand, grew up there, know what people are going through.
Absolutely. I think that's a great vision you have. That has to change because there's a lot of the community, some don't trust the sheriff's department. But I know that hiring people based on the area That's awesome. I'm going to ask you another question. Tell us about your career in law enforcement.
Well, you know what? I came on in 1978, and from 1978 to 2011, I worked 25 different assignments. So for those of you listening, I mean, I've worked 5 patrol stations. I worked at Pico Rivera Station. I worked Temple Station. I worked Carson Station. I worked Firestone Station. And then I'm partially out in industry and some Linux area when I was working gang enforcement. So I've worked those stations, plus, in fact, I've worked 5 custody facilities. So, you know, going back all the way to when the Hall of Justice was a jail. So I've worked Central Jail, I've worked Biscayne Center, I've worked Century Regional Detention Facility. In fact, when we get to Century Regional, that's the jail off of the 105, if you don't know that. That was originally built to be a direct supervision jail where the prisoners inside that particular facility had more access to programs and rehabilitation and things like that. Since then, it's become a women's jail, which I think it's not outfitted correctly, but that's a whole different discussion. In addition to all those jobs, I was also the director of personnel, running the entire department from the inside. So that's where I had the opportunity to go through recruitment and backgrounds and hiring and payroll, you name it, I did it. I've hired over 7,000 deputy sheriffs in my career. And going back and looking at it, that was one of the thrills of my life to do that. So when in fact I got done doing those jobs, I also worked in the academy training recruits. I've written the entire policy for field training programs. So in other words, when you go out and you're pulled over by somebody, the pullover and approach, the manner in which they do that, the training programs for brand new patrol deputies, I wrote all of those. So I'm very familiar with what they're supposed to do. And I realize for many of you watching out there, they don't always do it. I get that. So those are the things as the sheriff we've got to watch out for. So when somebody comes to me from the department telling me, well, this is how you're supposed to do it, I know when they're doing it right because I wrote the book for them.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. Here's another question that I want to ask. What did you think about the last sheriff's election when Sheriff Baca stepped down?
Yeah, that's an interesting time because, you know, I'm sure a lot of the folks out there realize that and this is my opinion, and everybody has their own, but I lived in the department at a time when it was good, when it was doing all the right things, and then for a period of time it became corrupt. And when you're working inside of a corrupt agency, as I was, it's very difficult for people who want to do the right thing and who want to be honest, because believe it or not, just like folks out there in the public feel you're targeted, I was targeted inside the department. And so there's a lot of people inside the department that actually get targeted also. These are the things that need to clean up. So if you can't clean up the inside of an agency, how are you ever going to clean up what they're doing on the outside to the public and the community? So back then, I can tell you when that transition occurred, a guy named Jim McDonald came in. Now, Jim McDonald is the current sheriff. He came from LAPD, so he grew up in LAPD for a long time. So he's got an LAPD mentality, and he handles things the way that they do at LAPD. He then went to Long Beach for a hop, a skip, and a jump, and then he was in an election with a guy named Paul Tanaka. Well, if anybody remembers the name out there in the press, Paul Tanaka is now serving time in prison. So in the last election, the sheriff ran against a guy who was going to prison. This time, he's running against me. And I have 40 years in law enforcement with the department. I understand it. I know how it works. I know how it operates. And I'll tell you what, it's not operating efficiently. And anybody out there that's in the public, in the community, especially East LA. I drive through East LA all for one, but I've worked when I was working enforcement. I did drive through East LA on occasion. So East LA is an extremely important community. It's one of those communities where the businesses and all the people there deserve the service. And they're not getting it. I mean, they're not getting it. There are enough people out there understanding that they're not getting it. And the department is ignoring the fact that not enough police officers training, not enough attention to the people in the community really demonstrates the fact it's a total failure.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, we have a question from one of the followers right now.
Yeah.
They want me to ask you, what will you do to get rid of corrupt cops, especially in East LA?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I'll tell you, and if you don't know this, there are articles regarding gangs and things like that in the department. And I'll tell you, right now, in certain areas, still have a problem with some devs in there that are still acting with that mentality. Now, you have somebody strong enough and in lead of the department to identify what's going on out there. When we talk about what's happening, whether it's in East LA, whether it's San Dimas, it doesn't matter. All police work. And the community that we handle there needs to be handled the same exact way. So, if I go from San Dimas into LA, I shouldn't be rougher in East LA than San Dimas.
Sure.
And the same way in Lancaster. In order to deal with corrupt data, you have to watch, you have to learn, you have to listen, and you have and be effective discipline processes that are fair. And that's not happening on the department right now. I will tell you right now, either they cut your head off or they do it. We all know that's how it works when you put your hand in the car. If your mother did nothing, you're going to keep cookies. If she cuts your head off, now you're never reading another cookie. Yeah. So there needs to be some reasonableness. But here's the biggest thing when it comes to the corruption. We need to have a clear system of when somebody makes a complaint, that we have people listening, people with compassion and people with heart, not people who are going to take the complaint and say, it's just another complaint, blow it off. That's what happened up in Lancaster. And if you don't know that, the sheriff's department was under a federal decree, a federal consent decree. And that federal consent decree was because we were profiling in Lancaster. Now, guess what happened to the people that were profiling? These were the executives. They got promoted from captain to commander to chief, and now one of them is an assistant sheriff. These are the problems that you'll find in the department. So if we're going to take the very people who are corrupt and put them at the highest levels, we're never going to fix it. You put me at the highest level on June 5th, and all of that changes.
That is awesome. Yeah, we need change there at the sheriff's department, and I believe you're the right guy for the job. And I want to ask you another question, Mr. Lindsey. Why did you decide to run for sheriff? Aren't you retired and you're coming out to run? Why do you want to run for sheriff?
Yeah, I was a commander on the department. So I was a deputy, a sergeant, a lieutenant, a captain, and then a commander. And for all of you out there that don't understand what that is, if you go to any city, when you see, hey, that's the police chief, I was higher than a police chief because I in our department, the sheriff's department, a captain is the same level as a police chief. So as a commander, I had 5 captains working for me. So the reason in 2011, I didn't really retire from the sheriff's department. I got recruited to go to the state. And I became the director of security for all 40 superior courts in Los Angeles County. So for the last 7 years, I've been overseeing all of the superior courts. And while I was doing that, I was overseeing all the bailiffs and all the budget in the Los Angeles County area. In doing so, I saw what was happening. You know what? Currently, crime is through the roof. Now, you've got the current sheriff getting in the Times and going out there and saying crime is down, but it's falsification. I guess it's strong enough. It's a lie. Crime isn't down. It's up over 60% in violent Part 1 crimes in the last 4 years. And so for all of you in East LA, when you hear, and this goes for every city in Los Angeles County, some of them are doing better than others. But when you hear somebody say crime is down, that's just fake news. That's false. That's a lie. And when you're going to lie about it from the beginning, then how are you going to go and fix it? So when I started seeing what was happening with the crime, when I started seeing that this guy was doing nothing for the homelessness, for all of you out there, if you've got compassion for the homeless, and I know that in there's some predators and there's people that need to go to jail, but in there's mothers, there's kids, there's people that are one day away from, not being able to pay their house payment. When you have these things happening, this current sheriff only had one deputy assigned to 4,100 square miles of homeless. That is terrible. I mean, how can you possibly look at that? But guess what? When he started his campaign, he put 14 more in there just so you out there, just so people in the public would think he cares about the homeless. This man didn't care at all. He didn't care at all to put one person in there. It's not getting solved. That's why in the last year alone, homelessness is up 25%.
Okay. And another question here, Bob. How's the morale in the department?
Well, morale is really bad. They took a survey. In fact, the union did a survey on morale within the department, and this covers the deputies, but it also covers the professional staff. And the professional staff in our department, whether it's the secretaries, whether it's the LETs, whether it's the custody assistants, these are the hardest workers in the world. It's not just deputies that make our department run, it's everybody in the entire department. But the morale survey came back that it's the lowest morale in the history of the department. And when you have low morale in any business, you know what that brings. And it's bringing a different feeling to the sheriff's department. When you have that type of low morale, how can you go out in the community and boost up the community? You just don't do it because every day is a bad day for you.
Yes, I agree with that. Now, Bob, Mr. Lindsey, does the rank and file deputy support you?
Yeah, actually they do. I've spent a lot of time not only talking to the community, but to the deputies. So about 3 weeks ago, they asked the deputy sheriffs of Los Angeles County, who do you want to endorse? Who would you vote for sheriff? And when they put that out there, I got 93% of the deputy vote. And the sheriff got about 3%. The other candidate got 2%. And then there was a category of nobody. We don't want to choose anybody. Nobody beat both the sheriff and the other candidate.
Okay, and another question here. Why isn't the deputy union endorsing you when the deputies are so adamant about you being the next sheriff?
Well, you know what? I think there's politics that gets into everything. But I will tell you this. The endorsements that I do get are very, very meaningful to me. And the biggest endorsements I want are really from the community. The people in East LA. When I have the mothers, the fathers, the people who are sending their kids to school, when you come and endorse me, when you come and vote for me, that's more meaningful to me than any political endorsement or anything else that I could ever get. There's a lot of people out there seeking endorsements from people who are way up here. When I grew up, my dad lost his job when I was 12 years old. And so I know what it's like to go with my dad. Well, one, I know what it's like when he's unemployed and we have to be on welfare and we're eating cheese and we're on the government plan. But secondarily, I know what it's like when he found a job as a janitor. I know what it's like to go with him to work at nights, mopping floors and doing those things. And that's why I say, I don't care what you do in life. Just do it good. Just be the best at whatever you can be. And nobody should be looking down on anybody for whatever job they have or how much money they make. Because you know what? We're all the same in God's eyes.
Wow. Yeah, and also too, Mr. Lee, there's a lot going on in Los Angeles County. The sheriff says crime is down. Is crime really down?
No, it's I mentioned that earlier, but crime is way, way up. I'm going to tell you, just so everybody out there understands. I think murder is probably the most heinous crime. I mean, we can say rape, we can say all these other things, but when you take a life of somebody, just this year alone compared to last year, homicide is up 56%.
Wow.
Those are people dying. And I will tell you what, this guy's saying crime is down when homicide's up 56%. to me, he's committing a crime and not telling the public that.
Yeah, and also I know you spoke a little earlier about this subject, but I hear there's a shortage of deputies. Why is there a shortage out there?
You know what? He just doesn't know how to hire. And I'm going to tell you, he takes the position there's not enough qualified people. Well, I'm going to ask everybody out there that are your watchers, your viewers, all the people that are within earshot. Do you think you have family members that are qualified? Do you think you have friends that are qualified? My guess is that you know people. And so I don't think he's looking in the right places. I don't think he's asking the right questions. And I'll tell you what, I had a young lady walk up to me. I was at a meeting with a group called Ceasefire out in South Central LA. And a young lady walked up to me and she said she had applied on the department and that she was very, how do you say this? She was sad. I mean, she was just downright sad because it was her dream to be a deputy. And she said she got disqualified and she wanted to know if I knew anything about hiring. And so I looked at her and I said, yeah, I've hired a few thousand people in my career at the sheriff's department. And she says, well, I was disqualified from this category. And she said the category of I was too compassionate. And I said, what? And she said, they said I was too compassionate. Now, mind you, I have never in 32 years in law enforcement heard that as an excuse. And I'm going to tell you, when I start hearing that people are too compassionate and they're getting disqualified, that tells me that there is a significant and severe issue with the sheriff's department, because that's exactly what we need on the sheriff's department, are people with compassion that care about the community.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also too, I mean, talking about hiring, Mr. Lindsey, do you know how to hire deputies and why does it seem so hard? Now, I know you explained it, but I know a lot of these things are happening because there has to be a shortage out there. I mean, there's things happening and the response and everything like that, so the question would be, is why is it so hard to hire? Is it the recruiting process, or is there not enough, say, dollars that are able so you guys could advertise to bring you people in from the community that want to either be in law enforcement?
Yeah, no, good question. And I think it's a combination of things. One, we need to get out earlier into the areas. And when I say that, we need to get into the high schools and we need to explain to everybody what it takes to be a deputy sheriff. And mind you, there's a lot of reasons, a lot of things that we look at. And for all of you out there who want to be deputy sheriffs, when I'm the sheriff, I want you to apply. We need good deputies, and we need a lot of good deputies coming out of the East LA community. But when you're doing things in life, even when you start at high school and you start maybe taking drugs or something like that, you got to look and say, is this going to impact me in my employment later on in life? Because the sheriff's department isn't the only place that does drug testing or gives you polygraphs or asks you these questions. So you're going to be asked questions like, how much drug usage have you had? How much cocaine have you used? How much LSD? How much PCP? They go through a whole litany of things of what you've done. They're going to ask you about your credit and how is your credit. They're going to ask you about your traffic tickets. They're going to ask you about your job performance. And so it's important when you go get a job, it's important when you do those things that even if you have a lousy boss, and trust me, I've had lots of lousy bosses in the sheriff's department, but even when you have a lousy boss, think about what you're going to say, think about what you're going to do, think about how you're going to perform, because eventually if you go to get a job at the sheriff's department, they're going to go back to that lousy boss and ask them how you perform. So perform at your highest levels. Always give 2 weeks notice if you're going to leave. Do all of the right things, because later on it's going to pay off for you. But to answer your question, there's a lot of qualified people out there. We're going to find them. I know how to find them. It's not a budget issue. We have the money to hire. We're just not getting out there and doing it. We need to come out right into the East LA community. We need to be in the churches. And I'll tell you, for all you military folks, and I know there's a lot of military folks in East LA that you have served this country, we're going to put together a program for you also. That program is going to be ex-military veterans who actually sit down, talk to you, and do the backgrounds, do the research. And then when it comes to the psychological, and all of you out there, there's a psychological evaluation when you become a deputy sheriff. Oftentimes, just to let you know this, if you've been an explorer, or you've been a previous police officer, or if you've been in the military, these are things that psychologists sometimes bounce you out for. And they bounce you out because they think you're going to be too rough or aggressive a cop. So for all you in the military, we're going to bring in military psychologists. We're going to bring in people who understand who you are. And we're going to get you hired, trust me. We're going to hire the first year 1,200, the second year 1,200, and the third year 1,200. That's a lot of deputy sheriffs. There's going to be a lot of openings. But I don't want to leave it with deputy sheriffs. If you want to be a secretary, if you want to be a custody assistant, if you want to be something else on the sheriff's department, I invite you after June 5th, please come apply.
Yeah, anybody that needs a job, Mr. Lindsey's right here saying you could go and apply. So I encourage anybody that wants to get in law enforcement to take up Bob Lindsey at his word. I want to change the focus a little bit, Mr. Lindsey, and I just want to talk to you about the homeless situation. It seems so enormous. Why is it skyrocketing?
Yeah, this sheriff didn't pay attention to it. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's just not. It's a situation where he let it get out of control. Now, he's not the only one that controls it. There's a lot of other things. But I think if everybody out there understands this, just throwing money at an issue doesn't fix it. When the money is thrown at an issue and it ends up with executives or it ends up with administrators, and it doesn't get down to the homeless person and into their pocket or into the motel or into the hotel or into a housing area, then we're just going to have a recycled system. And so you can place somebody and clean them up for 4 days, and then they come right back out to the streets, and that becomes an issue. In the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, we have not focused enough on taking care of those out on the streets. And here's an example. So if you take somebody and you arrest them, and they are a homeless person, and you process them, then they're maybe in jail for anywhere from 1 to 10 days. And then what do? They become homeless again because we don't take the time to document, to see where they've been. We don't have systems wherein if we've contacted a homeless person 80 times, we don't know it. We have no clue. So we have to begin documenting who we contact, what we do with them, how we program them, what works and what doesn't work. And once we start doing that and really paying attention to the homeless, not as a group, but as individual human beings, then we're going to be able to we'll never completely eradicate homelessness. We know that, but we'll be able to take a big chunk out of it. And at least there'll be a lot less people out on the streets.
Wow. So you have a game plan for decreasing the homeless?
Decreasing, yes.
Decreasing.
You said decreasing.
Yes. Do you have a plan in decreasing the homeless population?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We can also get involved. We have a bunch of closed jails up north, right? So there's no reason why we can't program some of what we're doing for some of the homeless that get arrested to put them up there up north. And then once they get released, why are we releasing them out onto the streets of LA or LA County? Why not release them into a section of the jail that's not being utilized as a jail, that's being utilized as a homeless area, as a job training area, as a mental assessment area. And then they're not out in the public. They're not struggling. They're not wondering where they can go. Because people who are looking for help right now, most of the time when they're looking for help, everybody says, well, it's full. There's no room for you. And so they end up giving up and they're still out on the streets.
Yeah, that's terrible, but that's a great plan if that could go through when you're elected. And now I'm going to switch again. Another question here. Force is always an issue in the community. What is your next opinion as force exists today?
Yeah, we have to take a real hard look at force. And you know what? Out in the public, there's, and this goes back to the way you hire and the way you distribute your deputy sheriff. I'm going to tell you that if you haven't grown up in an area, if you haven't been in an area before, And let's say, and I'll give you that, let's say you grew up in Beverly Hills. You've never been anywhere else in your life. And then all of a sudden we put you in a car and you're out in Compton somewhere. You overreact because you don't understand the climate that you're in or the people you're around. You don't understand what they're saying or doing. And a lot of times when you overreact as a cop, it can be a fatal mistake. So we really have to get people going out into the different areas. They're not only the same as the community, in other words, just the diversity that they need, but also that understand the community and that have been trained to be out in that community. You can't, it's like, and I'll give you an example. We have a lot of people in the sheriff's department that they're reserve military. And once upon a time when you were in the reserves, we used to call you weekend warriors. And you used to go out on the weekends and used to do those things. And then all of a sudden, guess what happened? The reserves were spending a year, 2 years, 3 years in Iraq or Afghanistan. They're still reserves, but they became full time. And they began losing their homes. They began losing all sorts of things because their deputy pay wasn't coming in. What was coming in was their military pay. So their wives were leaving them, their husbands were leaving the wives, they were losing their homes, and all these things were happening. Well, it's the same thing. When they came back, I started what was known as a repatriation program. You can't take somebody from the battlefield and then just put them into the community. You have to take them and give them the training, desensitize them from the fact that not everybody's wearing a bomb vest and things like that. And so that it's not, they're wonderful people, they were in a different zone. It's the same strategy here. We have to train people how to be in the community and how to react to that specific community. There's an art to it. And there's also the fact that we have to have our deputies showing an immense amount of respect to the community. If you want respect back, you have to give respect. And that to me is one of the most important things, whether it's in the prisons, in the jails, or out on the streets. Respect matters.
Yeah, I also hear Mr. Lindsey, there's a fear of retaliation within the department. Is that happening?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can tell you, I'm running for sheriff for all of you out there who don't know that. My name is Bob, so vote for Bob for sheriff. But I will tell you that when I go to events, like take, for instance, I went to an event up in the Santa Clarita Valley. I had deputies' wives come up to me and say, hey, listen, Bob, we're here on behalf of our husbands because our husbands were told if they showed up here, they would be disciplined. And that is exactly what, if you're talking about retaliation. So there's other retaliatory methods. There's the gag order in place on the department. Do you realize that if a deputy puts something on his Facebook or her Facebook, and it's negative towards the department. Let's say that a deputy is in East LA and the deputy doesn't like what he's seeing going on with the department in East LA. Hey, our service is bad or this or that. If that deputy puts something negative about the department on Facebook, he can be disciplined. The department is literally trolling the deputy's Facebooks and trying to find negative comments. And if they say a negative comment about the department or anywhere else, then they discipline them. We all know the Constitution. Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is gone inside the sheriff's department. So you can't say anything bad about your executives. You can't say anything bad about your policies. You can't say anything bad about the department. And what does this mean to the community? So if there's a problem going on in the community and if you say something about that because it's the sheriff's fault, you get in trouble for bringing it up. So of course they're going to keep their mouths shut. The deputies aren't going to be able to say we could do a job better out here because they'll get disciplined for saying it.
Also, Don, what do you think about what do you think is the role between the police department and the millennials? I know that's a challenge right now with the millennials. What do you think? What do you think? The role is between the sheriff's department and the millennials.
Well, I think we have failed when it comes to the younger generation. And I say we, the sheriff's department and other agencies have failed because we have failed to get out and understand the communication aspects of what's going on. Let's face it, when it comes to technology, it's no mistake that we got on this late because we had a bunch of older people doing it. If we had had like a 16 or 17-year-old doing it, we would have been on time, right? So when you get out there and you have millennials who are thinking differently, who utilize technology differently, I can go back and I don't want to age myself here, but I'm going to take you back to the mid 80s. Okay. We used to do all of our reports. Everything we did was with a number 2 pencil. I'm sure you know what that is, because I think we do Scantron still. But I was told, hey, it would be easier if you did your report on this computer over here. I said, what's a computer? Why would you want me to do that? And so it took me another 4 months to realize that the computer was the best way. They had to take me kicking and screaming to the computer because I was fine with my pencil. But I will tell you, this is where we have to change right now in the sheriff's department. We have to get rid of our number 2 pencils. We have to move forward, and we have to begin communicating, realizing that there are separations, there are differences that we have to go ahead and merge. We have cops who are not millennials and cops who are millennials. They even have trouble communicating when they're in the patrol cars because of their differences of opinions and or their differences just in life in general. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but you know what? We can do it. We can all work together.
Sure. That I think that's a great situation there where everybody's got to work together to try to figure out, you know what I mean, how you could fix some of these issues. Now another thing, Bob, I want to ask another question here. What is the sheriff's department role in the immigration issue? I know that's a big issue, not only in Los Angeles, but there's issues all across the country pertaining to, the immigration and the DACA and everything that's happening right there.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Well, one, and the last thing you mentioned was DACA. Well, there's no reason why that hasn't been approved. It's all politics. The DACA thing should have been approved a long time ago, but the bottom line is we have politicians getting involved in all these decisions. I'll tell you what, I don't think politicians need to be in law enforcement, that's for sure. When we talk about immigration, I have spent a lot of time in the community, and I will tell you, to a person, I have never heard anybody tell me that they want the violent rapists and the felons and the robbers to stay here. Everybody wants them out. And I'm talking down to every level of person that I've talked to. And it doesn't matter what community it is. It doesn't matter whether you're in a white community, a black community, a Hispanic community, Chinese community. People are afraid of people who continually commit these types of crimes, and they want them out. But as far as the immigrants that are here not violating the law, that's not my job. My job is not to deport anybody. My job is to take violent criminals and get them out of here, out of the country, if they're from out of the country. Aside from that, what we need to do is embrace the community. We need to, because there's a lot of right now, and I know you know this, George, but there's a lot of people not reporting crimes. Yeah. And they're not reporting them because they're afraid if they come forward that they're going to be deported. And that is sad because we need those crimes reported. We need those people out of here. But here's, as you get deeper into thought and into the things that are happening with the community, when you start talking about the difference between the criminals and those that aren't, what happens out in the community is when they are afraid to say who they are, we then start getting intervention from ICE into the community. I don't want ICE in my community. I want my sheriff's deputies in the community. So there comes this point in time where you got to take the violent people, get them out, give them to ICE so that I can go to them and say, I want you out of my community. I don't want you in my community. I can police my own. And I think when we get to the point where everybody understands that it's okay to get rid of the really bad people and that we really need to embrace all others who aren't committing those crimes, that there's not going to be any issues here in LA County, and that I can keep ICE where they're supposed to be, and that is doing their deportation stuff with just the violent people.
Yes, Mr. Lindsey, also, what makes you better than the candidate McDonald, the current sheriff? What makes you better than that?
Well, you know what? I think I mentioned earlier, I got 40 years with the Sheriff's Department, 25 assignments. I know the inside of the department. I hate to say this, I know it better than my family because I committed my career to the department. Now, my wife is 1,000% behind me in this because she's seen what's going on in the community and she's seen what's going on in the department. And, I was going to retire. I was moving, I was out and I was supposed to be gone about 8 months ago. And, but instead I took a look and I made a U-turn and I said, this is ridiculous. I spent all these years in a department I love, in a community I love, and it's falling apart. And so I'm giving it a shot. I'm standing up, that's what I'm doing right now. And either way, I'm blessed. God has blessed me with a beautiful wife, with 39 years of marriage, with 3 wonderful kids and 5 grandbabies. They're all girls. I wish somebody would give me a boy, but they're all girls. And I love each and every one of them. And when I think about leaving, when I think about retiring and leaving my grandbabies here in this, it scares me. It scares me to just drop my daughter off at school. My granddaughter's off at school because of everything that's happening. I just wondered, my God, am I going to see him at the end of the day? This is a crazy place to be right now. I shouldn't be thinking like that. But even as a cop, I'm thinking like that. We need to change this, and I know I can do it. And I know working together with the community, we can do it together.
Yeah, what makes you a better candidate than Villanueva, the retired lieutenant?
Well, Villanueva, he's an interesting character. I can tell you that. He didn't have nearly the assignments I had. He was very limited in what he did. He's a lieutenant, but if you look at his career, what he did was he didn't get along with very many people. In fact, management really didn't like him at all. But that's not the issue. What he did was he actually sued the department to become a sergeant. And then they were afraid he was going to sue again. That's how he became a lieutenant. When you look at the vote inside the department, Villanueva got less votes than the worst sheriff in the history of the department. That tells you how much respect the department has for Villanueva. So when I can capture 93% of the vote, it's because they understand my career. They understand my compassion. They understand my leadership. They understand that when I come in, I am going to, and they already know this, I'm a community person. So they are prepared to go ahead and make a U-turn from doing nothing right now to going out and working, whether it's taking the criminals to jail, whether it's getting rid of the 12,000 MS-13 gang members that we believe we have here, and or going into the schools and helping the schools. Right now, even the youth programs are suffering. Those are things we need to fix because there used to be, like in South Central, 300 kids in the youth program. There's now 150. Why? 150 are on a waiting list because this sheriff isn't staffing it. So you got 150 kids now roaming the streets with their parents probably at work with no place to go. These are the things that need to change in every community.
Absolutely. Bob, can you tell me what your position is on the CCWs?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe in, one, the Constitution. I believe in freedom of speech. And as far as CCWs are concerned, I believe that we as citizens have the right to be armed. Not everybody wants a gun, and I understand that. But when you look around LA County, we know it's pretty easy for the bad people, the people who want to commit robberies or crimes, to get a gun. I can pretty much get one at will. So for us not to allow the citizens who want to defend themselves to have the right to get that gun is terrible. So I believe in shall issue, and I believe if you say that I want the CCW because I want to defend myself, that's sufficient. So you have to go through the background. You can't have the record that would prohibit you from having it. And then you'd have to go through a training class, obviously, and qualify. And then that would give you the ability to go ahead and get that CCW. And of course, along with that comes responsibility. But I can tell you, in many of the school shootings that we've had, the FBI just put out a report that 10 school shootings were literally stopped dead in their tracks because somebody in the school was armed. Otherwise, we would have had 10 more schools that had 5, 6, 10, 15, 18 dead. So I'm a firm believer in that. I'm also a firm believer for all of you ladies out there watching that you should go ahead and also highly consider carrying a CCW and getting trained, because FBI stats also show this, that many rapes throughout the country are simply stopped by a female who's being attacked, pulling out a gun. They run. They don't even have to shoot most of the time, but they run. And so these are protective devices. They're designed to keep you safe and your family safe.
And also, what are your opponents? What are your opponents' position on carrying concealed on CCWs?
I'm sorry, Jim. I didn't hear it. He was issued?
Yeah, I said, what are your opponents' positions on CCWs?
Oh, okay. Excuse me. I can tell you that the current sheriff, there's 10.5 million people in Los Angeles County. Out of the 10.5 million people, only 190 people have a CCW here in LA County. That's 0.0000006% of people that when you apply, get it. So those are probably people who donate to the campaign, or those are people who are friends. And it's ridiculous. Those are the 190 capable of defending themselves when they go to the mall or they ride the trains or anything else. But for everybody out there, just understand that when you go to Ventura County, if you live in Ventura County, you can get a CCW. When you go to Orange County, you can get a CCW. When you go to Riverside County, you can get a CCW. When you come to LA County, you can't. So people are driving into our county from Ventura, from San Bernardino, from Riverside, who are carrying guns. They're citizens, but it's because they live in these other counties. That's not right. We should be able to. The other candidate, Villanueva, he believes that he should be able to pick and choose who he's going to give them to. I don't need to pick and choose anybody. I think it's a constitutional right.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know there's another hot topic. California legalized cannabis for adult use. Do you have a position on cannabis? What's your position on it?
Yeah, I do have a position on that. I'm going to tell you, California voted and they made cannabis legal for adult use. Now, the industry is having to go through a lot of regulations. I mean, serious regulations. And the people who are running the legal cannabis industry are having not only to pay a lot of money, but they're having to go through a lot of regulations and hoops to do it right. Whether it's the packaging, whether it's how it's produced, how it's measured. And so what people are getting is they're getting a known product. In fact, it has to go through a chemical analysis. So there's a lot involved in that. So here's my position on that. I'm not going to close down legal cannabis. In fact, what I need to do is I need to take the legal cannabis industry that is very, very regulated and have them assist me in getting rid of the illegal cannabis industry. So what do I mean by that? The regulated cannabis industry's target audience and sales is 21 and over. The illegal industry is selling it to our kids and those that are 18 and under. I want to eradicate that, and I can do that with the help of the legal industry by them helping me police. And by that, I mean they're going to make money so they can buy me some police cars. They can help me pay for education in the schools. They can help me pay for other things associated with getting the public to understand the dangers of driving under the influence. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm partnering. And the other thing is, and we've seen this in the other states, And this is a terrifying thing when you think about it. The legal industry, as much as they're doing everything right, oftentimes organized crime comes in and tries to take it over. And so we don't want organized crime here. In addition, you have strong arm robberies, you have home invasion robberies, because it's a cash business. So this brings another set of problems to us. And then in the past, because of the way it's run, there are people who hang around and they do things which makes it a public nuisance. With me teaming with the cannabis industry, the legal portion of it, I can go ahead and check organized crime and not allow it to come in. I can assist with not having those robberies and the home invasion robberies, because we all know this. Like when a drunk driver hits somebody, the drunk driver never dies, right? It's always the people in the other car. Same thing with robberies when you get to dispensaries and things like that. You know who gets shot? It's the kid in the stroller outside the dispensary. These are the things I don't want in LA County. So my teaming is going to get rid of the illegal portion of it, and we will work as partners in the schools, on the streets, and in their dispensaries.
Okay. And also, Mr. Lindsey, how's the campaign at this point?
It's going very, very well, but we're down to the last 2 weeks. I need help. I need votes. I need lots of votes. I need people to get on their social media. I need you to tell all of your friends and family. I don't care if you go tackle a stranger, but you need to tell people to vote for Bob. And it's real simple. There's 3 people running for sheriff. I'm the only one that's named Bob. So that's all you have to remember. Now, in different districts, my name is either at the top or in the middle or at the bottom. But vote Bob on June 5th and get everybody else to. You can find out about me if you go to my website. It's Bob, the number 4 sheriff. Bob, the number 4 sheriff.com. And if you want to contribute $5, that's great. I can use it. We're putting yard signs out there. We're putting billboards out there. We're doing everything we can. And George, thank you for this wonderful opportunity you're giving me to, share my experience, to share my positions with all those in your community, because the East LA community, as you well know, has long and historically been one of the most precious spots in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. That's where our academy is, for God's sakes. And that's where I went through the academy, by the way, right there up on the hill. So it's a very, very important city to all of us. And we want to keep it that way. And we want to keep it number 1.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And also too, Bob, I want to do another live interview on the day on June 5th. So we'll be able to go live and be able to tell people to go to the voting polls and vote for you. Okay. And so
I would love to do that. And
we're going to,
in fact, I'm honored. I thank you for that opportunity. And I thank everybody. And I know you have a wide audience because of the good things that you do for the community and because you share news with them. And, that's the biggest thing. News is important. Like I told you in the onset of this, the sheriff that we currently have is out there lying about crime. But once you hear the truth, I'm hoping that people will pass on the truth instead of the lies that are being sold for him to try and get reelected.
Yes, and I just got a text, and just to let you know, Bob, there's a surprise here for you. The former parole agent, President Cash, K-A-S-H, is going to give you an endorsement.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
Yes. You're going to be endorsed by President Cash, former parole agent, and President Cash.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's it. Got another endorsement today.
Thank you.